we can get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this session on how you can use design to help you take products and their experiences to the next level. My name is Lena. I'm one of the presenters for today. And I'm a part of the QuickBooks desktop team in Bangalore here with Intuit. I'm a principal product designer. We also have my co-presenter, Natarajan. Natarajan, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hey everyone, my name is Natarajan. I'm a senior product designer with Intuit. I'm on the same team as Lena, so I also work with QuickBooks Desktop. It's great to have all of you here, and let's start talking.
With that, let's get started.
Awesome. So I'm going to start. So we wanted to make this session interactive. It's already been interactive with you telling us what you're expecting out of this session and also telling us which function you belong to. So we just wanted to make it even more interactive. And so we thought we'd kickstart with a quiz. So what is going to happen in this quiz? You will see a slide with two images, right? You have to pick an image which shows the design that is most correct. This is a timed quiz, so you will have a time within which you need to understand which is the most correct and then vote for it. You will see a poll that is similar to what you saw before. You will see a poll for each of the slides with options of A and B, so you can select which one is correct. So with that, should we go to the first question? Awesome.
We'll give it a few more seconds.
Yeah. So we have option two being the winner with 67% of the votes. Should we go to the answer? Yes, so two is correct. That's because it has the status indicator with green. Now, we're not saying using blue is wrong, but green, red, and gray are standard indicators across the industry. So it is probably better to stick with what is standard rather than reinventing something that already exists. Cool. Second question. Kind of close.
Is it close?
Wow.
All right.
So we have 51% voting for option one and 49% voting for option two. That's really close. That is absolutely close. So the answer is one. The reason being that the image aspect ratio with respect to the card, what that means. So we must always use an image in a size that's proportional to the real estate or the space that is available. So when you do a center aligned with white, it kind of look odd. It kind of looks very odd when you have multiple cards of that. Think of it, if you look at it individually, it's okay. But when you look at it as a set, it looks really odd. So always try and use images or crop them to a size that is more proportional to the real estate or the space that you actually have available right now. Next question.
Looks like this was easy for a lot of folks.
Pretty easy. Cool. So 90% for one and 10% for two. Not that much difficult. Yes, it's one because destructive actions are usually red. And when we say destructive actions, it means any uh, a button or a button or an icon that's going to stop or end a workflow. It's usually red because it tells the user the seriousness of the fact that you're going to end a workflow. So ending a call is so that you don't do it, so that you don't do it by mistake. So it's usually red to indicate, hey, make sure that you really want to end this action. Question.
Hmm.
We have option 2 with 57% and option 1 with 43. Interesting. The answer is 2. The reason, because if you look at the capitalization, so if it's a sentence case, it's actually body text. So you can invite other group members to this conversation as body. So if you keep your buttons also with the same sentence case capitalization, it doesn't make sense. It might confuse the user that, oh, it's just another text block and not an actual action. So to keep it consistent with the blue button on top, which has capitalization across the two words invite friends. So skip being capitalized also does make sense, just to keep a consistency between what is a button and what is body copy. Interesting, 2 has 84%, 1 has 16. So 2 is the right answer just because of text wrapping. If you see in the first image, thin line T is on the line above, and then HINLINE has been wrapped to the next text. We don't do that. It should be the whole word like in the second option. Cool. So now we're going to push it. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to increase the difficulty. So again, the same thing. There are two images. You need to spot which is the most correct, but we're going to increase the time and the difficulty as well. So these are very design details. These are very specific details that you need to look for. So if you can spot them, consider yourself rock stars. Cool. 62% said 2, 38% said 1, 62% of you are rock stars. I guess we need the slide up again. Oh, Meena joined back. Sorry guys for the small hiccup. So we're just bringing the slide back up. Yeah, there we go. Awesome. Could we move to the answer? Yes. So yeah, the answer is indeed option 2, because option 1, the circles are not actually circles; they're squircles, as to say, which are basically squares with rounded corners. So yeah, option 2 is correct in terms of geometry. Last question. Interesting trend. Cool. Awesome. So option 2, 61% say option 2, 40% say option 1. That is cool. That is right. The reason being, we're not saying option 1 is wrong though. Option 1 is technically not wrong. But if you compare that, this is for a mobile phone, a larger button height helps having a greater tap area, which means people with fat fingers like me. So it would be easier for us to actually get to the button easily than the one on the left. So again, guys, as we said this, choose which is the most correct answer. So we're not saying one is right than the other. It's all context, and we'll talk about context later.
Am I audible? Yeah. So hopefully you all found that interesting, and that gave you all a sneak peek into what goes behind, or what goes into designing an experience for users in your products. So before we get started, would love to hear or see what y'all think design is. Y'all can probably add that in the Q&A section again. What do you think design is? Whatever comes to mind. Some interesting answers.
To make users' life easy. Interesting.
I like that.
Visual representation of the functionality. Interesting. Packaging of a product.
Healthy mix of intuition and empathy. Awesome. So I'd like to begin by saying what design is not, or not just limited to. So design is not limited to just the UI or user interface elements. It's not just about branding or the logo or the colors. It's not just about making things look pretty or good or making things pop. And it's definitely not, well, not only limited to adding delight for our customers. So there is no one perfect or accurate definition of design out there. Um, it really depends on what speaks to you and what you intend to do with it. So these are some definitions that we came across. Like the Oxford Dictionary says, it's doing or planning something with a specific purpose or intention in mind. Some of the definitions that you all shared had that. It's the process of envisioning and planning. Someone had brought up planning. Um, and of course, Steve Jobs, he said that design is not just what it looks and feels like, it's how it works. So design is not just limited to form, it's function as well. The one common piece or thread across all these definitions of design is that design is not, it's important. It's not just the icing on the cake or an afterthought. You think of design throughout defining the experience for a user. And with that, I'll hand it over to Natarajan to talk about what bad design is and what it could do.
Yeah, so yeah, as Lena said, before we talk about good design or what are the principles and what are ethos of good design are, we want to talk about what happens if you have bad design. So we can't escape with saying that we didn't do any design on the product because no design is bad design. So it is easier in the beginning to not have a design when the product is being made just to cut time or costs or whatever resources in terms of whatever we want to cut down on. But it might become expensive in the long run. And we wanted to showcase a few examples that illustrate what happens when you don't think about design while building a product or workflow. Now, what you see in front of you is the ballot that was used in the 2000 presidential election in Florida. Now, if you had followed that election, Florida was the decider that gave the presidency to George W. Bush. Now, there was a lot of controversies in that election about there was a recount with the Florida ballot and all of that. And one of the things that emerged with that controversy was the ballot design itself. So if you see right now, the rows are not aligned, right? So because of this, that is why the name came up called the Butterfly Ballot. Now, it takes a while for us to understand which button corresponds to which candidate. Now, think of a situation where you're standing in a booth to vote, a line behind you, and you probably have already decided who to vote for. So you're coming to the booth, you're scanning for the name, who you want to vote for, and you're looking for the corresponding button for that name, right? So what the people of Florida claim is that they have read the ballot wrong. Because of the misaligned rows, they thought Al Gore, who's in the Democratic Party, was listed second. But as per design, he's listed third. So what they did was, where they were supposed to vote in the third button for Al Gore, they actually ended up voting on the second button, which was for the Reform Party of Pat Buchanan. So they ended up splitting the votes between the Democratic and the Reform Party, which was supposed to go to the Democratic Party, allegedly. Now, which gave the victory to George W. Bush for the state of Florida, which actually gave him the presidency. Now, if you think about it, that design did not just cost someone the presidency. If you just step back a little and think about events that happened after George W. Bush became president, an aligned ballot could have just stopped the whole Iraq war. Now, the impact of bad design can range between being very, very funny to being very, very serious. On one end of this impact, you see the Hershey's logo, right? Hershey's is their flagship product is the Hershey's Kisses that you all know of. Now, Hershey's used to have this skeuomorphic 3D kind of a logo where they actually had the product as part of the logo. Now, what they wanted to do was go to a much more flatter design. So when they did that, they made it flat, and chocolate being brown, they used the brown color just to indicate that it's chocolate. Now, the netizens of Twitter, right, who are known to troll people when they goof up, well, they took this and they compared it to a particular emoji from the Apple keyboard, and it became a laughing stock. Hershey's became a laughing stock for a week among design Twitter. So just because they didn't test it, they ended up being a laughing stock for a week. Now, this is not that serious because they could roll back their logo. They could roll back their logo and then do a redesign and come back. It's not that serious. But on the other end, what you see is a screenshot of a hospital software, which was used by nurses to enter vital information of the patients that they were treating. And based on the data, the system used to show alerts. Now, on this screenshot, if you can see where the black arrow is pointing, the thick black arrow, there's a red text on yellow background. Now that is the actual alert. Now nurses who are new to the software were not able to figure out that that's an alert and that the nurses had to do something about it, right? Because it's not that obvious, it's not that clear. And this led to multiple complications among the patient and in the end to the death of the patient. So what we're saying is there is always an impact of bad design, right? The scale of it, whether it's funny or whether it's serious, it depends on what went wrong and what is the seriousness of the product that you're actually building.
So with that, we'd love to walk you through some of the design ethos, which sort of acts as the foundation for some of the principles and guidelines that we recommend that you follow when designing for your product. The first one being designing for clarity. During the design process, you think about the business goals, the user problems, and keeping these in mind, you define the functionality or the features of your product. With that, it's really important to always let the user know where they are and what needs to be done, which is achieved by clarity. Now, how do you achieve clarity? Some basic principles are simplicity. Google is the epitome of this. Their search just does that. There's no clutter, there's no other noise. It's just the search bar. And that tells the user that this is what we're supposed to do here. You're coming here to search and this is what you can do. They're very clear about that. There's nothing else to distract the user. And then there's visual hierarchy. So in this particular example that I've shown here, we have the Slack website. They've used elements very sparingly. Made good use of space, white space. They've drawn attention to the right elements using images, large font sizes, so that the user knows where to look. When you have hierarchy and visual hierarchy in your interface, it guides the user in how they need to consume content. And then, of course, there's the right use of metaphors. Metaphors, they help translate abstract concepts into something that's relatable for users. So in the case of like this search icon, which is ubiquitous for searching, it's very clear that the magnifying glass is associated with searching. So you will use this everywhere where a product or experience needs to tell its user that you can search here. The gear icon is very commonly used for preferences or settings, things like that. The cloud is nowadays more commonly used for indicating that something is online or something is in the cloud. So metaphors are a great, element to use in your interface or in your experiences because they're memorable. People can relate to them easily. So, and you can draw attention to whatever function it is that you want to sort of amplify. The next is designing for the user's relationship with the product. People, just like people develop relationships with other people, they develop relationships with products. They can get attached or not attached. One aspect of developing or helping a user develop a relationship with their product is to be able to understand the user's context. Context is very key. When you understand the user's context, you can be relevant for them. You can give them relevant information. And with this, you learn more about users. One classic example of personalized content is Netflix. Their system and their algorithms are so strong that they understand and recommend what's relevant for you and make recommendations based on what you have watched in the past. Another element of personalization that they've brought in is even the thumbnails are customized or personalized rather. It depends if you look for if they've understood or learned that you watch movies with a certain actor or certain actors, they bring up thumbnails of those actors in those scenes of other movies that they're recommending you watch. So this is a really good example of personalized content. Customized, again, like I said, is when you give control to the user. So Slack recently updated their experience by, on the left-hand side, navigation. Now you can customize your views. You can, if you have like hundreds of Slack channels, or Slack threads going on, you can group those, create subgroups, and that really helps you stay organized. Another aspect of developing relationships with products is just like you would have a relationship with a person or a human being, that's because you're able to relate to them because they have a personality. And you can do this, you can also give your product a personality. And you can also do this by creating feelings through the design and through your experiences. This can be done through multiple ways, by introducing little micro interactions, by introducing feedback, and I'll give you examples of what I mean by this. So this is an example of where Google, through Google Slides, it gives feedback to the user. Now I know that I can edit the title of this presentation or this deck because of the blue highlight that appears when I click on it. That is feedback to me that this is editable. This is something that can change. Then there's MailChimp. This is a great example of how they give feedback on the go. While I'm setting up my password with MailChimp, it tells me that, yes, I have one lowercase character, one uppercase character. It's giving me feedback while I'm setting up my password, as opposed to much later when it says, oh, you're supposed to have special characters. It's supposed to be 12 digits or 12 characters. And this is so much more useful, and it just eases the whole process of logging, of creating a login credential, which is painful as it is. They've made this really pleasant and fun. Duolingo is an app that, or an experience that teaches you languages, and they've done this beautifully. Through their onboarding experience itself, they gradually encourage users to get hooked onto them and to sign up, which is great. They've introduced and injected so much personality into their onboarding experience that users just it's like almost playing a game when you sign up with Duolingo. And with that, that's the segue for the next ethos, which Natarajan will talk about.
Yeah, thanks, Leena. So as Leena talked about how products must have personality, we wanted to go deeper on this as this is a much broader topic, right? Now, there are many big brands and products that have a certain personality. They have that at their core. Now, if you look at the brands on the slide right now, so the logo itself is so powerful that to put the name on the slide, it's not at all necessary. The logo is part of their personality as well. Now, if you look at Apple, Apple has this non-corporate, artistic, not a suit tie kind of environment, and it has this creative personality. Nike has this exciting, cool, active, like on the go kind of a personality. Even their logo, which is an iconic logo, is a representation of their just do it personality. Now, personality of a product helps connect with users at an emotional level. We connect with other people on an emotional level based on their personality. I, for example, will connect with a person who's sarcastic because I find that funny. So I connect with them better. So when people connect to products at an emotional level, it helps the product in attaining and retaining customer loyalty, right? And that is what every brand is looking for: customer loyalty. How do we retain customers so that they're loyal to us? And look at Apple's user base for that. They are fiercely loyal to that brand. And Apple itself has made its brand and its product a part of the people's life who connect with Apple's personality of being creative and being creative and being not a suit and tie kind of a personality. Now, how do we define the personality of a product? Now, there are questions that you need to ask yourself about the product that you're building. Now, the first question to ask is, if your product were a person, who would it be? Now, do you want your product to be serious or funny or hyper, or like what do you want it to be sarcastic, which will connect with me definitely. And this depends on what is the product that you're building and who are you building it for. So that is two things that you really need to understand: is what is the problem you're solving in terms of what is that application or the product that you're building, and who are you building it for, because that helps you define that personality of the application that you're building. Now, as an example, there is this Nike Run Club app. It helps runners to track their runs. I've used it only once, not because the app is bad, physical reasons. Can't run, don't like to run. So actually the app is built for beginners, intermediate runners, and also pros, right? Pros use the app to track their pace and time and whatever. Now, What this app does is that it has these motivational graphics when you finish a run. And it doesn't matter how bad your time was. I know this. I finished a run at 12 minutes. That's worse than walking. But still, it was motivating me saying, hey, great run and all of that. That's great. So it helps in celebrating every run or walk that you take, right? So what Nike wanted, if you look at the history of why they built this app, Nike wanted to everybody to have a trainer who is kind of a cheerleader who helps them motivate to get to fitness or whatever. And since they can't put a physical person to everybody, they wanted to create a digital trainer with the same personality. And that really shows in the product that they've created, which is the Nike Run Club. So the next question is, if your product could talk, how would they speak, right? How would they interact with others? This means how would be the tone of voice of the product that you want, that you're building, and how will you write that product copy? What is the feeling that you want your customers to feel when they read and interact with your product? One example is Microsoft that's on the screen right now. It's straightforward, no frills, and as direct as possible. And some of us are not happy. Personally, me, I'm not happy with this kind of directness, but some people are. So if a screen comes up saying, hey, something went wrong, we don't know what it is, you can either do it now, skip for now, or do it later. So some people are okay with that kind of directness because they kind of connect with that kind of a personality, right? So this is a group that bonds more with Windows, and people who advocate for Windows are mostly these people who connect with this kind of language because they're okay with it, because they want their application to be serious enough to be direct, right? And these are the people who won't connect with Apple because that's a little bit different. And that's what I connect with because that's the kind of functionality I would connect. Now, it's not necessary that you need to be serious all the time, right? So what you could do is you could be cheeky. Now, this is MailChimp. MailChimp has some amazing copy on their product. And this is an error message that MailChimp shows up when the user, they choose a username that already exists. Like, this is just amazing copy in terms of just saying, hey, this exists. Maybe it's your evil twin Spooky. So there are people who resonate with it. And we found out that it's usually startups who use these services for their newsletters and all of that, because it is the kind of work environment that the startups have, that and they're building products which are similar in personality to this, that they engage with this even more. Now, what we're saying is that we're not saying that one way is right or the other way is wrong. They're both right in their own ways, because you in the end need to understand who you're building this for and what is the product you're building. So if your users connect to more this kind of a cheeky copy, go ahead and use it. But if they prefer something very, very serious, for example, if there is enterprise software that you're building, probably they would like something that is direct so that they know what is wrong and they can go ahead with fixing it. So it's all up to you to understand who your users are and what you're building to come up with that personality that you want your application to have. Now, designing for everyone. This is a favorite topic of mine. When we say designing for everyone, we do not mean design for everyone under the sun. That's not what we do. Applications cannot serve everybody because they are focused on solving a certain problem which a certain set of people face. Now, when we mean design for everyone, who you have identified as a potential user of your product. So what does that mean? We spend time in understanding, as designers, as engineers, as product managers, we spend time in understanding who the users are going to be, who will be using our products. We try and understand if they're general users, whether they're techie, they're not techie, they're power users in terms of how to use computers, or they're SMEs, which means you're building something very niche, let's say for a nuclear reactor, whatever. So you go and find out who you're building for, right? And we as designers and product managers and engineers, we must make sure that we design for everyone in that identified set of users. Which means we design for people who are blind, we design for people who are deaf, we design for people who are colorblind, we design for people having issues with manual dexterity, and for people with any other disabilities. We really need to understand the difference between when the user says, hey, I do not want to use your product because it is not useful for me. I'm probably not the person you want to sell your product to, or I don't have the feature that I'm looking for in your product. Versus when a user says, I want to use your product, I really do, but I'm unable to because of it's not accessible. So how do we build accessible software or programs or products? There are a few tips and techniques. I'll go through some of them very quickly. So we have keyboard accessibility, which means add shortcuts, add hotkeys, and allow users to navigate using the keyboard. Now, if you realize using the tab to navigate in a software and using space to select a checkbox, radio button, whatever, is a universal features that exist among all Windows software, right? And it is something that people, and it's a big win for people who don't use a mouse. And it's also something used by power users because they find using the mouse a little constrained. So they actually do everything on the keyboard itself. So understand your users. Keyboard accessibility is very, very important. For example, here we're showing Chrome. Chrome has these shortcuts for new window, which is Command N if you're on a Mac, Command T for a new tab. And there's a pro tip. So basically Command T and Shift will open a tab that you've already closed. Next topic is, yes, color contrast. This is a very, very personal topic for me as I have issues with contrast. Yes, I'm a designer and I have issues with color contrast. I, for the life of me, cannot read gray text on gray background. And I have turned up the brightness and the contrast on my monitor to way up, and people in the office who I work with, Lena, can vouch for it, that it'll blind people who are looking at my monitor, right? Now, colors, they indicate a lot of things, right? They sometimes indicate where do you need to go next. They indicate errors. They indicate alarms. If you remember the hospital scenario where the alarm needed to be very, very, it needed to, people needed to understand, okay, this is an alarm. So colors mean a lot of things. And it is necessary for us to make people understand the difference that the colors are bringing, even if they are colorblind, which means that we need to use a color palette which is accessible. Even if they're colorblind, they see the difference that, oh, there's something that is different coming up. But there are a lot of resources on the internet that give you accessible color palettes. Like you have the WCAG, which is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. You can go there, check the guidelines. They help you determine how accessible your product is in terms of fonts, in terms of font size, in terms of colors that you're using on your fonts, and the text, and also the background colors. And with all these resources in place, and it makes it easier for us to test when we're designing and building, we must make sure that we build products with proper accessibility. Now, keyboards and mice, they should not be the only way of entering and entering data, and screen should not be the only way of reading data, right? If possible, have alternates in your products. Voice control, like what Google has with Google Assistant, or Apple has with Siri, they help people not to physically interact with the product. They can just talk with it. And this is a huge win for people with dexterity issues, right? Screen readers like JAWS, they help in reading out what is on the screen. If you're a developer, you know tags. So if you add tags in your HTML, you can add extra information that could be read by only the software and does not need to be visually seen. That helps people to know, hey, this is a button, I must do this, I must press spacebar to do this, etc. You can add a lot of information that the screen readers can pick. Now, one of the best examples I've ever seen is from a company that I usually don't agree with everything that they do, but they have done a phenomenal job in this, which is Facebook. Now, Facebook uses AI ML to add secondary text to photos. It is not manually entered, it is generated. Facebook algorithm, it looks at the photo, it understands what the photo is and adds a secondary text. So screen reader, if it's going through a photo, obviously it can't describe the whole photo, but what it does is maybe it's a photo of two people on the beach at sunrise, which gives at least what the person who's using the screen reader, at least context of what is on the screen. And it is absolutely amazing the way they've done that. Now, there are always questions with accessibility of if I do it, if I make it more accessible, oh, is it going to look good? Because, hey, I've followed all the accessibility guidelines and all. So it's never a trade-off between accessibility and aesthetics, right? So if you make it too aesthetically pleasing, you might fail a lot of accessibility issues, and there might be a lot of accessibility issues leading to people not being able to use it. But if you make it too accessible, for example, like the monitor that I have with high brightness and contrast, which actually blinds people, is not good for the people who don't have any disabilities and just want to use the product. So what you must do is have a balance between accessible, making a product accessible and making it good looking. And how do you do this? Keep testing. Every step of the way, when you design, when you add a new design, when you change design, keep testing it with both set of users so that you understand that, okay, this is the balance I have reached. And now I can clearly say that my product I have designed for everyone.
All right, we know that was a lot of information to absorb, but hopefully with those examples, we were able to illustrate and sort of explain what each of those principles and guidelines meant. So just a quick recap. When you design for clarity. The user needs to know where they are and what exactly that they have to do. You design for the user's relationship with the product. You give them feedback. You keep them engaged through the interface, through interactions. You give your product a personality because you want your users to develop a relationship with the product. So just as you would have a relationship with a person, giving your product a personality makes that even easier. And last but definitely not the least, you design for everyone. And like Natarajan said, you're not designing for everyone under the sun, but whoever you've defined or defined as your target audience, make sure you're meeting all of their needs, understanding all their contexts, all their disabilities, all their challenges, and make sure your product meets those requirements. With that, we thought the most accurate or most relevant definition of design for us, at least, was by Jared Spool. He's like a leader in a design leader in the industry. And he said that design is the rendering of intent, which basically means it's a process where you understand users through empathy, and then through the product, through the experience, while coming up with solutions, you understand their pain, and you help them achieve or complete their goals, or you understand their intentions and help them complete what is needed to be done. That is what design is. Um, with that, we'd love to hear what you thought of this session. And shortly after that, I think we have a few minutes left to take up some questions.
Yeah, I marked a few questions. So one is on the quiz that we had. It's basically about the invite friends and skip, where we had capitalized versus smaller text. So the question is, generally capital letters attract the users than the normal text. So if we keep it as capital invite letters and sentence case skip, it may cause the users to invite actually instead of skipping it simply.
Interesting.
So yes, that is a case, but as designers, we actually look for giving the option as much as possible, but using other principles of visual design and etc. to guide the user through. But we really don't want to cause confusions to the users in terms of, hey, this is a button or this is not a button. So we give them options as much as possible in making it clear that these are the options that you have, but also nudge the user towards where you want to lead them through. You want to take a question maybe?
There's so many questions. I'm just wondering which ones to answer. Any good books to refer the design principles with examples? I don't think anyone, I'm just going to mark this live. There are a plethora of books out there, but even more, there are more updated, more relevant, design websites, blogs, articles. There are industry leaders, with phenomenal insights that, have their experiences to share, that have their take on principles. There are so many. I mean, I can't pinpoint any one or two. They're like, I mean, I have my personal, design leaders I look up to. And but if you just Google it, there's so many out there. There's just so many.
Yeah, there's a question here, how to compare design from various perspectives. It is difficult to come up with one if we have lots of prototypes available. Yes, that is actually an excellent point. It is actually a good problem to have if you have a lot of prototypes available. That means you have a lot of options to test with the user, who in the end is going to be the person, the users are going to be the end users of your product, right? So if you have multiple prototypes, test it with the users. You have this option of doing ABC testing, maybe make it live if you have the time to actually do A/B testing with finished products, but not use the prototypes to test it with the users and see what resonates with them more in terms of like how are they easily able to solve the problem that you're trying to solve, how quickly they are able to solve, or how easily it is understood. And taking these considerations, you can come up with a final design, which could be a mix and match of all those prototypes that you have?
I'd like to take this question. What are the design nuances you need to be aware of while designing financial applications? So some of the same principles I would say you'd need to keep in mind. Context is always important. Showing relevant information is important. And then if users are going to be interacting with these on a regular basis, you want to show them what's relevant maybe at that time of the day, or if it's all about numbers, you need to follow principles of like visual hierarchy, providing enough contrast. What do they need to do like in a specific screen of an experience? What you can't have a screen or an experience that where you're giving them too many options or too many things to do. There has to be like just one or two key things that they need to do, and that needs to stand out very clearly. So pretty much all what we took you through is a good foundation, if nothing else, to keep in mind, when you're designing financial applications, any application, even if it's e-commerce or e-learning. These are like some of the basic principles that you keep in mind.
What are the research methodology followed for the Intuit products? You want to take this up with Diffudi?
What are the research methodologies? Yes, so we follow so the design process, the design thinking process is, it's called different terms. We at Intuit, we have sort of tweaked and customized it, and we refer to it internally as D4D, Design for Delight. It's a process of understanding users, gaining empathy through empathy, and then you start with a lot of ideas. So you go broad and then you go narrow, and to help you do that, you do a lot of testing with users, a lot of iterations, a lot of prototypes, rapid experimentation, basically. That is the method that we follow, while we are designing for experiences at Intuit. How to bring about a change in the workplace in terms of design thinking, maybe with a smiley. Change in the workplace. I'm wondering if you mean if it's an organization. Are you talking about an organization that doesn't necessarily understand design, and it probably thinks design is limited to what we talked about earlier, is just making things look good or making things look pretty? Sorry, where did that question go? Yes. I would say that I think almost every organization goes through this, and they're at various levels of maturity when it comes to design thinking. I think I'm fortunate to say that, that Intuit is one of those organizations where we're fairly mature in terms of design thinking. Our cross-functional partners appreciate and also take part in the design thinking process. Again, design thinking is not limited to designers. It's something we advocate across the board, across the ecosystem, across the company. Everyone can use design thinking. So it's really about, if you're a small startup or even in a big company and you feel lost as a designer, it's really about, being that advocate, being that champion, and really going and, evangelizing, showing the benefits of design thinking, the results of, testing with users, of thinking, getting into the customer's skin, and really designing, keeping the users in mind. So it really starts from there, evangelism. There's no easy way to go about it, I think. Natarajan, do you want to add something there?
No, so yeah, you covered it all.
Awesome.
There's one question that I like. How important is color consistency while designing an interactive platform? While creating a personality for a product, how important is choosing the correct color? For example, when one thinks of Facebook, blue comes to mind. Similarly, for Tinder, red comes to mind. Are these colors chosen deliberately, or are they just personal choices of the creator? They're definitely not personal choices of the creator. They might have started as personal choices, but when you get designers on board, when you get the whole brand identity on board, then it becomes, you start testing it with the users in terms of, hey, we're building this product and this is our logo, this is the brand colors that we have. So you just don't show a color to the user, you show a whole brand guideline as, does this resonate with you with the problem that we're solving, or does it resonate with the brand that we're trying to build? So yes, it is very, very important for color consistency. And it's also very, very important to choose the correct color that represents your brand. But all of this is not just, okay, I feel like, okay, purple is great, so I'm going to use purple. It doesn't work that way. There's a lot of process involved in terms of testing it with the users. What does a particular solving of a particular problem, what does that, uh, what comes to the mind of the users, and then testing the whole brand identity that people start creating.
I'd like to add two more things to that. Great points, Natajan. So when it comes, even when it comes to your brand, following brand colors, if you have a brand color palette, again, I would say that context trumps consistency. Now, in the case that we showed earlier, right, in the quiz where we have, the calling buttons, the actions, you have a red disconnect and like a blue disconnect. Now, let's say Intuit had a calling application, and we had blue is a part of our colors, right? And red isn't. But would we use blue or would we use red? Now, context is important. Familiarity is important. Users are more used to the paradigm of red being used to disconnect, or to draw attention to danger or alerts. So context is always important as well. Consistency, yes, it's great to maintain harmony, but always solve for context first over consistency is what I would say. How to go about designing a product on a tight budget? Tight budget. Do you have designers at all? That's like the first question. If you don't, that's fine. If you have a design mindset, that's all you need. You just need to really love your users, be passionate about solving for them. And then, constantly testing. You can be scrappy with like your mockups, your, whatever you need to get the developers to implement or build. There are multiple tools out there, again, varying, price ranges. There's the Adobe suite, there's Sketch, which is a lot more, friendly in terms of licenses. A lot of free tools out there right now that really help you, that have already have these components that you just have to like plug and use, so I don't think you need to have a big budget to be able to design the right experience for users anymore. I think we're not in that era anymore.
And keep testing with the users.
Yes. What methods do you use for testing designs with customers at Intuit? We have something what we call Follow Me Homes, which has a very interesting story. Our founder, Scott Cook, when one of our products, one of our legacy products wasn't doing well in the market, he actually he followed customers home. Like when they would buy it off the shelves at a supermarket, he would follow them home, as creepy as that sounds, but it was so useful. Because he really wanted to understand how users were using the product and what was wrong with it or how could they improve it. And that led to what we call today, what we call Follow Me Homes. It's basically really interacting with users. You don't ask them leading questions, you let them guide you, tell you what their typical day is like, how are they using your product. You don't put words in their mouth. You just observe. That's basically it. That's how we ideally test with our customers. When we're sitting in India and our customers are abroad, we have a lot of remote sessions, which means we have to talk to them at when it's night for us and during their daytimes. But a lot of it's as crappy as that sounds, is actually very effective. We are able to share our screens on the tools that we use. We're able to give them control of the prototypes that we test, and it's fairly effective, we have found. And when we do get the chance, we do travel there and go and visit them in their office or in their home. So yeah, multiple methods. We also do lots of surveys. Apart from these qualitative studies, we do a lot of quantitative studies as well.
I think that was the last question that we had to take. We're
Yes.
over time.
Lots of other questions. We're sorry we couldn't get to answering all of them, but we hope you all found this useful. Thank you for joining.
Have a great rest of the evening and weekends here. So have a great weekend too. Yes, stay safe.